By now, I'm sure most are aware that in the just passed presidential election, Mr. Trump got 306 electoral votes and Mrs. Clinton got 232. That in spite of the fact that Mrs. Clinton won the popular vote by around 1 million votes. That's caused a tremendous amount of consternation by a large number of people, particularly those that wanted her to win. They say it's the only country where you can win the election by getting the votes and lose the election by the process that's in place. And so it started an effort to get rid of the Electoral College. Some people that will make sense, but they need to understand that there's good and wise reasons that the Electoral College was originally selected. In this slide that you see here, we can see that the way the vote was spread based upon counties across the United States. The blue shows the Democrats, the red shows the Republican votes for the president. We're using the Republicans and Democrats not as an endorsement or an indictment against either of them, but to show the fact it makes the case so graphically. As you look carefully at this graph, not this graph, but this map, you can see that the blue, which is the Democrat, is centered largely on the large metropolitan areas, the large high-density states, high population density states, whereas the red is the more sparsely populated states. The Electoral College kept all the states in the play, which is an important thing. We hope we'll come to that conclusion as we go forward through this. Keep this map in mind as we go to this next map. This map shows the large metropolitan areas in the medium green and the smaller metropolitan in the light green and going down into the white, which would be rural. As you think back about that map we just looked at with the counties and their distribution, we see that the large metropolitan areas are in the medium green, and that's where Mrs. Clinton did the best. The rest of the states seem to go more Republican. Well, I've done a little analysis on this, and you need to just kind of go with the flow for a minute with me and recognize that these 15 largest metropolitan areas have a population in those 15 metropolitan areas of over 107 million people. Now, they're not all voters, but understand we're just going by population now, and then we'll kind of tie this all together, and you'll see how these metropolitan areas with the largest states would absolutely, completely control any electoral outcome if we went to a popular vote. So there's the 15 largest metropolitan areas with 107 million people. In the election just passed, there was about 145 million votes that were cast. About 61 for Mr. Trump and 62 for Mrs. Clinton. The bulk went to the rest of the players that were in the game for the election. But a total of 145 million. Again, Mrs. Clinton winning the popular vote with 62 million votes. It's interesting how close it was, popular vote too. This graph demonstrates quite clearly how that was spread throughout the country. As you can see, this came out of the Washington Post. The blue, again, being Democrats, the red, Republicans. Look at the overwhelming majorities. It was a landslide in the large metropolitan areas for Mrs. Clinton. As you went into smaller and smaller communities, it gets to the point by the time you're at rural communities, it is really and truly a landslide for Mr. Trump. There aren't as many people, but those that did vote absolutely were in favor of Mr. Trump. So we can see how the large metropolitan areas completely went with Mrs. Clinton. Now, if the election were based upon population in the 15 largest metropolitan areas, they could potentially largely control the outcome of the election in just 15 metropolitan areas. Isn't that interesting? Well, let's take another look based upon state populations. Here we have a chart that I've put together in regards to the 15 top states based upon population. If you look at that, you'll see, and you may see your state in there, I don't know. But if you look at that, you'll see that over 202 million people in America live in those 15 states. If you look at this one, it's the bottom 15 states based upon population. Just over 19 million people live there. The 15 largest states overwhelmingly have the bulk of the people, and the 15 smallest states just have a smattering of people, comparatively speaking. Let's look at the 20 middle states. I call them the toss-up states by population. These are the ones that that are between the 15 top and the 15 bottom. So there you have it. They have just 90 million people. So if you take them all together and you put the 15 top states at 202 million, you take the 15 bottom states at 19 million, you take the middle states at 90 million, you have a total population of over 311 million. Do the math and you'll see that the 15 top states have 65% of the population, and they would have 65% of the votes too. So we can see that in any national election, the top 15 states would likely determine the outcome. Isn't that amazing? What would I predict from this? Well, there'd be a heavy focus in any campaign on those 15 states. In fact, an almost overwhelming focus. And there'd be plenty of promises made to those 15 states to buy the votes. What do you want? I'll bring that to you. And so that would increase dramatically the social welfare state of promises delivered through the largesse of the national government. And there'd be virtually zero campaigning done in the 15 smallest states. And there'd be a smattering, a sporadic effort on the top 20, the middle 20 toss-up states. So what that would mean is that 1/2 to 2/3, perhaps, of the states would be ignored in the election. The great bulk of effort would be made on those states that were where all the votes were. And the states as political entities, smaller states, of course, would become even more irrelevant than they are now, because the Leviathan government is looking just simply to numbers and size. And the country would basically disenfranchise certainly the bottom 15 states, and it would probably disenfranchise at least half of the 20 states that are in the middle, because they don't have enough votes to make a difference anyway. So 1/2 to 2/3 of the nation would be completely left out of the election process. Now, we know that the Founding Fathers never intended for this to be a popular vote thing. They wanted the electors to be good and wise and honest people that would select a president based upon the wisdom of that individual and the ability of that individual to be a president of the whole United States. It's just amazing to me how the states have become less and less relevant by the way we've handled it with the 17th Amendment, eliminating the state's seat at the table with the senators, and this would eliminate it even further, and the great bulk of the country would lose their status in the United States as a way to be able to participate in this great process. Another time, in another Liberty moment, we'll talk about what the intention was to be able to help everybody be engaged in this without the population being directly elected in it. But for now, we hope to see you again. Until then, take care, and we'll hope to visit with you again in another Liberty moment. Thank you for being with us.